I'll never forget the day I opened that Bible. It wasn't supposed to be anything dramatic, just another quiet afternoon, with the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the smell of old wood in the room. I was dusting shelves, putting away laundry, and straightening the books that had collected fingerprints in time. My husband's Bible had always rested at the corner of his bedside table, untouched by me, because he treated it like something sacred, something personal. But that day, I felt an odd pull, almost as if that worn leather cover was calling to me. When I picked it up, I noticed the edges of the pages had turned yellow, the spine cracked from years of use. My fingers brushed against the thin paper, and for a moment, I thought about leaving it closed. After all, it wasn't mine to read through, not fully. But when I let it fall open, something slipped out. It wasn't a bookmark. It wasn't a church program. It was a folded piece of paper, creased at the corners, tucked right there between Psalms and Proverbs. My heart jumped. A letter. Now, you have to understand, when you've lived decades beside someone, you think you know them. You share meals, children, laughter, and tears. You believe there's nothing left to hide. But in that moment, as I stared at that old piece of paper resting against the holy words of Scripture, I realized there were still shadows in my husband's life that had never seen the light. I should have put it back. I should have pretended I never saw it. That would have been the respectful thing to do. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and when you mix it with suspicion, it can burn hotter than fire. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it, slowly, the paper almost crackling like it was resisting me, like it knew the damage it was about to cause. The handwriting wasn't mine. That was the first thing I noticed. It was delicate, almost poetic, the loops in the letters full of affection and warmth. My stomach turned, and then I saw the salutation. My love. I froze. My love? I read that line again and again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something innocent, but they didn't. They stayed right there, etched into the paper like scars I didn't know my heart carried. My breath came shallow. My ears buzzed. 1,000 questions rushed into my mind. Who wrote this? When? Why was it hidden here, inside his Bible of all places? The book that was supposed to represent truth, loyalty, and faithfulness now held a secret that could unravel everything. I wanted to tear the letter apart right then and there, to erase it from existence, to pretend I never saw it. But a darker part of me whispered, keep reading, because sometimes the truth doesn't come knocking politely. Sometimes it hides in the very place you thought was safest. And so I read. Line by line, word by word, each sentence was a blade. I could almost hear her voice, whoever she was, soft, adoring, spilling out secrets meant for a man who was supposed to be mine. But here's the cruelest twist of all. The letter wasn't dated. I couldn't tell if it was old, a remnant of a past before me, or something written while I was cooking dinners, folding laundry, raising children, and trusting him. The ambiguity was torture. As I sat there clutching that paper with trembling hands, one thought kept circling in my mind like a vulture over prey. How long had he been carrying this with him? I didn't know yet, but that letter was about to change everything. My marriage, my faith, my family. Nothing would ever be the same again. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one who needed to know what was written inside. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept hearing the crinkle of that letter every time I closed my eyes, as though the words were whispering to me in the dark. My husband lay next to me, breathing steady, the same way he had for years, and I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how many nights before this one he had closed his eyes with secrets pressed so close to his heart. You see, when you live with someone for decades, you start to recognize the smallest details. The way his voice softened when he was proud, the way he'd hum when he was working in the yard, the way he'd avoid eye contact when something was weighing heavy on his mind. Back then, I'd always told myself that avoidance was just his way of being a man who didn't like to share too much. But now, after finding that letter, my mind dragged me backwards, forcing me to replay scenes of our life with a new filter. I remembered the early years, when we were young and broke but filled with dreams. He worked long shifts, sometimes coming home too tired to talk, and I thought nothing of it. I told myself he was exhausted, carrying the weight of providing for us. But now, I wondered, was there more? Was he carrying someone else's words? Someone else's affection, even then? And then there were the trips, business, he called them, conferences, training sessions, all the things that pulled him away for days at a time. I trusted him because that's what wives do. Trust was the foundation of our home. But trust, I was learning, is a fragile thing. It doesn't take much to shatter it, sometimes just one folded piece of paper between the pages of a holy book. My stomach churned as memories kept resurfacing. I recalled a time, years ago, when he had come home smelling faintly of a perfume I didn't own. He laughed it off, saying a coworker had hugged him in congratulations for something, and I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I didn't want to be the kind of wife who suspects. But now I couldn't ignore how my mind clung to that one moment, like a warning sign I had chosen not to see. And then there were the calls. Late-night phone conversations where he'd step outside, his voice low, his tone careful. He told me it was work, important matters, things I wouldn't understand. I trusted him. I trusted because love without trust is a prison, and I didn't want to live locked up in suspicion. But maybe I had been living in that prison all along without realizing it. The seeds of doubt had been planted years ago. I just hadn't watered them. But the letter, that letter was the storm that made them sprout overnight. It's strange, isn't it? How something so small can unravel everything you thought you knew. A folded note, a few lines of handwriting, and suddenly the past no longer looks the same. It's like looking at an old photograph and realizing there's someone in the background you never noticed before. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Lying there in the dark, I asked myself the question no wife ever wants to face. Had my whole marriage been a lie? I wanted to believe the answer was no. I wanted to cling to the moments of laughter, the family dinners, the celebrations of birthdays and anniversaries. But another voice inside me whispered, what if all of that was just a cover? What if love, loyalty, and family were just masks he wore while hiding a second life? I turned my head toward him that night, watching the rise and fall of his chest, his hand resting peacefully on the blanket. And I wondered, did that hand, the one that held mine at the altar, also hold someone else's in secret? The weight of suspicion pressed down on me like a stone. I didn't have answers yet, only questions that gnawed at my soul. But I knew one thing. This wasn't over. That letter wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a door. And now that it had opened, I wasn't sure I could close it again. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of me. The sun poured through the lace curtains, painting patterns on the worn wood surface, but I barely noticed. My eyes were fixed on those words written in a hand too delicate, too affectionate to belong to anything innocent. I smoothed the creases with trembling fingers, reading again from the very top. It began, "My love." 2 words that felt like daggers. I kept reading. I know you said you can't always be with me, but every time I open the Bible, I feel like you're near. Your words stay in my heart, and I pray for the day that we don't have to hide anymore. Hide? My stomach twisted. The ink was faded, but not enough to erase the meaning. She wrote about stolen moments, about whispered promises, about a prayers for a future together. I could almost hear her voice, gentle, yearning, dripping with longing. And then I saw it. A line that made my heart pound louder than the clock ticking above the stove. I hate that she doesn't know. Sometimes I wonder if she ever suspects. But you assure me she's too kind, too trusting. You say she would never doubt you. She. That she was me. I press my hand against my chest as if I could stop my heart from tearing itself apart. Too kind, too trusting. Those were the very traits I thought held our marriage together, and now they were being used as weapons against me. I read on, even when part of me screamed to stop. You have given me hope in ways I can't describe. I carry your words with me the way others carry prayers. And if we have to keep waiting, then I will wait, because loving you, even in secret, is better than not loving you at all. I dropped the paper on the table. My hands shaking, the room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. This wasn't just an old flame, some relic of youth hidden away. This was ongoing, present. She was waiting. And my husband had let her. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. Instead, I found myself whispering questions into the silence. Who is she? How long has this been going on? Do my children know? Do my neighbors? Am I the last to discover the truth in my own home? I stood up, pacing the kitchen floor, the letter clenched in my fist. Memories assaulted me again, sharper this time. The business trips, the late-night calls, the distant look in his eyes some evenings when I thought he was just tired. How blind I had been, how naive. But then a new thought, even darker, crept in. If this letter was hidden in his Bible, it wasn't just a slip of the hand, it was deliberate. He had tucked her words among God's words, as though seeking absolution, as though sanctifying his betrayal. That realization burned worse than anything. Not only had he betrayed me, he had desecrated the very thing we both claimed to hold sacred. For a moment, I considered confronting him right then, shoving the paper in his face and demanding the truth. But then another part of me, colder, wiser, stopped me. No, not yet. Because once I revealed what I knew, the game would change. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Instead, I folded the letter back up and slipped it into my apron pocket. It felt heavy against me, like a stone I couldn't put down, but I carried it anyway. I told myself I needed more time to think, time to gather strength, time to decide what mattered more, the truth or the life we had built on lies. As I went about the day, cooking, cleaning, pretending everything was normal, I felt like an actress trapped in a play I didn't agree to. He smiled at me that evening and asked about dinner, told me about his day, and all I could hear was her voice in my head. I hate that she doesn't know. Well, now I knew, and knowledge, once given, can never be taken back. I looked at him across the table that night, wondering how many other truths were hiding behind that familiar face, and I made a silent promise to myself. The letter opened the door, but I was going to walk all the way through. I was going to uncover everything he thought I would never suspect, because maybe I had been too kind, too trusting, but I wasn't blind anymore. For the next few days, I lived like a stranger in my own house. Every sound felt louder, every silence heavier. The clatter of dishes, the creak of the floorboards, the turning of a newspaper page, all of it seemed to echo with the weight of secrets. And in the middle of it all sat my husband, calm, steady, acting as though nothing was wrong. But something had changed. Not in him, in me. Once you've seen the cracks, you can't look at the wall the same way again. I kept replaying the years in my mind, combing through memories that once felt warm and safe, now tainted with suspicion. I remembered the time he came home late from work, saying his car had broken down.
I had believed him, made him a warm plate, and kissed his forehead. But now I wondered, was that really the truth, or was he with her? I thought about the birthday he forgot, the trip he said he couldn't take because of a sudden meeting, the way he sometimes avoided eye contact when I asked simple questions. At the time, I brushed those moments aside because love requires patience, forgiveness, understanding. But with the letter in my pocket, those same moments looked different, like puzzle pieces that had always been there, only now they fit into a picture I wished I'd never seen. The hardest part wasn't the suspicion. It was the doubt. Doubt doesn't just eat away at your marriage, it eats away at your memories, your very sense of reality. I started questioning everything. Was our wedding day as pure as I remembered? Were the vows he spoke ever truly for me? When he held me at night, was it love or obligation? I found myself staring at photographs on the wall, family vacations, Christmas mornings, birthdays with candles and laughter, smiling faces looking back at me, frozen in time. And I asked myself, were those smiles genuine or just a mask to cover the lies simmering underneath? And then came the cruelest thought of all. Was I the only one who didn't know? Did my children ever suspect? Did neighbors ever whisper? Hadn't my friends seen signs that I was too blind to recognize? The humiliation of it wrapped around me like chains. Betrayal in marriage isn't just about love, it's about dignity. It's about realizing the person you trusted most may have let the world see a truth you were too naive to face. I wanted to confront him, but each time I tried, the words died in my throat. Instead, I watched him closely. The way he sipped his coffee, the way he checked his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, the way he grew quieter when the mail arrived, as if he were waiting for something or someone. Every little action felt like evidence, and yet I had no proof beyond that letter, proof that was both everything and nothing at the same time. At night, when he fell asleep beside me, I would turn over, facing the wall, clutching the blanket to my chest, and I would ask myself, is this what love becomes? A performance? A fragile illusion we tell ourselves to avoid facing the emptiness beneath? But the truth has a way of gnawing at you until you can't pretend anymore. One evening, I caught him staring out the window, lost in thought. I asked him what he was thinking about. He smiled faintly and said, "Oh, nothing, just life." But his eyes told me otherwise. They were distant, carrying memories and conversations that had nothing to do with me. And in that instant, I knew, whatever life he was thinking about, I wasn't part of it. The illusion was crumbling. And I had a choice to make: keep living in the safety of denial or shatter the glass and face the painful reality head on. And deep down, I knew which path I was going to take. I had rehearsed it 100 times in my head, how I would ask him, how he would respond, how the truth would finally come to light. But when the moment came, nothing went according to plan. It was a Sunday evening, the kind of evening we usually spent in quiet routine. He sat in his chair, reading the newspaper, glasses perched on his nose. I stood in the doorway of the living room, clutching the letter in my trembling hands. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He lowered the paper slowly, his brow furrowed. "Of course. What's wrong?" For a moment, I hesitated. My mind screamed at me to back down, to put the letter away, to go on pretending, but the weight of silence had already become unbearable. I stepped forward and placed the folded letter on the coffee table between us. "Do you recognize this?" His eyes flicked down, and in that instant, his whole face changed. His shoulders stiffened, his breath caught, and the color drained from his cheeks. He didn't reach for it. He didn't even try to hide his reaction. I felt my chest tighten. That silence, it was louder than any confession. "Who is she?" I whispered. My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. "Who wrote this to you?" For a long while, he said nothing. He just stared at the letter, his jaw tightening, his hand twitching as though fighting the urge to grab it, to tear it, to erase it from existence. Finally, he looked at me. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't even guilty. They were tired. "Where did you find it?" The question hit me harder than any answer could have. He wasn't denying it. He wasn't confused. He knew exactly what I was talking about. "In your Bible," I said. My throat burned. The place I thought held your faith, our faith, and inside it I found a lie. He sighed, leaning back, his hands clasped together. For the first time in years, I saw him not as my husband, not as the man I thought I knew, but a stranger sitting across from me. "It was a long time ago," he muttered. "It doesn't mean what you think." "Then tell me what it means," I snapped, my voice trembling with anger. "Tell me why another woman's words are hidden inside your Bible. Tell me why she writes to you like she knows you better than I ever have." His eyes closed. He rubbed his forehead, and for a second, I thought he might break. But instead, he said softly, almost pleading, "Some things are better left in the past." The past, two words that cut deeper than any blade, because marriage isn't just about the present. It's about the past we share and the future we build. And if his past belonged to someone else, what did that make me? Tears welled up, but I refused to let them fall. I don't get to decide that for me anymore. The air between us felt heavy, suffocating. Years of trust, love, and sacrifice, all hanging by a fragile thread. I wanted him to fight for us, to beg for forgiveness, to tell me I had it all wrong. But instead, he just sat there silent, as if the truth was too heavy for him to carry into words. And in that silence, I realized an even more painful wound than betrayal. Sometimes, the worst wound isn't the lie itself. It's the refusal to heal it with honesty. I stood up slowly, my knees shaking. "If you don't tell me the truth, the letter will, and I will find out, even if it destroys everything we've built." He looked up at me then, panic flickering across his face for just a moment, but it was enough for me to know that the story wasn't over. No, the story was just beginning. When you're married for decades, your life becomes a tapestry, not just of two people, but of everyone connected to you. Children, grandchildren, in-laws, neighbors, they all get stitched into your story, and when one thread unravels, the whole fabric begins to tear. After the confrontation with my husband, silence filled our home. Days turned into weeks, and though we lived under the same roof, we might as well have been strangers passing in the hallway. The letter lay hidden in my drawer, but its presence hung over us like a storm cloud. It didn't take long before the cracks spread. My daughter noticed first. "Mom, you sound different on the phone," she said one evening. Her voice was careful, probing the way children speak when they know something is wrong but are afraid to name it. I brushed it off at first. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired." But mothers know, and daughters know too. A week later, she came over unannounced. That's when the real fallout began. She found me sitting alone at the kitchen table, the letter spread open before me like a wound I couldn't stop touching. She froze when she saw it, then whispered, "Mom, what is that?" I should have hidden it. I should have spared her. But after years of carrying secrets that weren't mine, I was too tired to protect his anymore. I pushed it toward her with trembling fingers. "Read it." Her eyes scanned the words, and I watched her face change the same way mine had the first time. Shock, confusion, and then a deep, aching sadness. Dad, this isn't from you, is it? Before I could answer, the front door opened. My husband stepped inside, briefcase in hand, his expression weary from the day. He stopped cold when he saw her holding the letter. The silence that followed was unbearable. She turned to him, eyes wide with betrayal. "Is this true? Was there someone else?" His face crumbled. He tried to reach for her, but she pulled away. "No," she said, her voice breaking. Don't touch me. You lied to Mom, to us, to all of us." The fallout didn't stop there. Word has a way of spreading in families, whispered across phone lines, shared at dinner tables, slipping into conversations that were never meant to carry so much weight. Soon my son knew, then the in-laws, even the grandchildren overheard fragments they were too young to understand. Everyone wanted questions, everyone wanted answers, but answers were the one thing my husband refused to give. He would sit in silence, shaking his head, muttering, "It was the past," as if those words could shield him from judgment.
But here's the truth. The past doesn't stay buried when it's written in ink and hidden between holy pages. The worst part wasn't just my pain. It was watching my children's faith in their father collapse. The man they had admired, trusted, and loved suddenly became someone they didn't recognize. Their foundation cracked, and in some ways, they blamed me for revealing it. "Why didn't you just let it go?" my son asked one night. His voice was sharp, filled with frustration. "Why dig it up after all these years?" I stared at him, tears burning in my eyes. Because lies don't disappear just because we pretend not to see them. The family that once gathered around our table with laughter and warmth now sat in fractured silence, each carrying a different version of the truth, each wounded in a different way. And I realized betrayal doesn't just break two people, it ripples outward, cutting through generations, leaving scars that may never heal. But still, one question haunted me more than all the others. What did the letter really mean? The house had grown heavy with silence. My children avoided visiting. My husband retreated into himself, and I carried that letter with me like a ghost, tucked away in my nightstand, yet never leaving my mind. But something gnawed at me, something I hadn't allowed myself to truly consider. I had read the words, felt their sting, and jumped to the only conclusion that made sense: betrayal. But what if there was more? One evening, when the weight of everything was too much to bear, I pulled the letter out again. I spread it across the table, smoothed its creases, and forced myself to look closer, not just at the words, but at the handwriting. It wasn't my husband's handwriting. The realization hit me like ice water down my spine. The curves of the letters, the slant of the ink, it was distinctly different, more delicate, almost feminine. My hand shook as I reached for the envelope it had been folded in. I had ignored it before, too consumed by the contents. But now I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to in my grief. The postmark, the date. It was decades old, older than my marriage. I sat there frozen, the truth slowly unraveling. This wasn't a love letter written to my husband during our marriage. This was something far older, something that belonged to a past life I had never been told about. The next morning, I confronted him again, this time with calm, not anger. Tell me, I whispered, placing the letter in front of him. Whose words are these? His face went pale, his lips trembling. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with tears in his eyes, he whispered a name I had never heard before. It was the name of a woman he had known long before me, a woman who, as it turned out, had been his first love. The letter wasn't a betrayal of me.
It was a relic of a heartbreak he had buried, a memory tucked away in the pages of a Bible because he hadn't known where else to keep it. She had died young, tragic circumstances, and he had carried her memory with him ever since. Not as an affair, not as ongoing infidelity, but as grief he had never allowed himself to process. I sat there stunned. My anger dissolved into something far more complicated: pity, sorrow, and an aching realization that the man I thought I knew completely had lived with a shadow beside him all our married life. The twist was cruel. The pain wasn't about infidelity. It was about never being enough to erase the memory of someone who came before me. And as I stared at him, broken, tearful, finally spilling a truth he had buried for decades, I realized sometimes the deepest secrets aren't about what people do behind your back. They're about the parts of their hearts they never give you. The night after the revelation, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to my husband's breathing beside me. For decades, I had believed we shared everything: joys, sorrows, even the small, ordinary moments of life. But now I understood that part of him had always belonged to someone else, someone I could never compete with because she lived only in memory. At first I felt crushed, not because of infidelity, but because of invisibility. All those years I thought I had been the center of his world. Instead, I was the one who held his hand while his heart quietly whispered another name. But as dawn broke, something shifted in me. I realized I had a choice. I could let this truth destroy me, or I could let it teach me. Life is not just about the roles we play in someone else's story. It's about owning our own. My husband's past was not mine to erase, nor was it mine to carry as a burden. It was simply a piece of who he was, long before me. And though it hurt to know, it didn't erase the decades we built together. The children, the laughter, the hardship survived side by side. I thought of my daughter's tears when she read the letter, of my son's anger when he demanded why I hadn't just left it buried, and I understood something profound. Truth always comes with a cost, but silence carries an even heavier one. Because pretending not to see a wound doesn't heal it. It festers, it poisons, and even though this truth nearly broke us, it also stripped away the illusions. For the first time in our marriage, we were real, raw, imperfect, honest. I sat my children down and told them everything: the letter, the woman, the grief their father had carried all these years. Their faces shifted from anger to sorrow and slowly to understanding. I said softly, "He loved her, but he also loved me. And he loves you. Human hearts are messy. They don't always choose in neat, clean lines." It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was necessary. And in that moment, I saw the power of truth, not as a weapon, but as a release.